For about 6 years, McCown and Kookie averaged nearly 50 races a year. So I'm no expert, but 50 times 6 is 300 races at least. Wild. So I dug this up out of an old article from the May 1981 Motorcyclist magazine issue. Shared an old story about a guy named John McCown and his dog Kookie. John McCown's an average everyday fellow who has an enthusiasm for the great outdoors. He lives in Hesperia, California, and for context, that is the desert. About an hour outside of Los Angeles, he has access to some of the best off-roading in all of America. And after riding around with his dog in the front basket of his bicycle, he thinks just that. It's time to step it up. It's time to get a dirt bike, and he does.
Now, we don't know what specific model of Putsch dirt bike John had, but we know he had a Putsch, who started production in the early 1900s and eventually ended in the early 1970s.
He wants to bring his dog with him. His dog wants to be with him. So what does John do? John looks around his garage and finds what he can. He finds a piece of rug. He tapes this to his gas tank. His dog hops right up, and the rest is history. Now John and Kookie are racing semi-professionally, if not professionally, weekly, monthly, yearly, for years to come. You see, this dog Kookie of John's is next level. This dog actually learned how to read the terrain, and John could use the dog to anticipate what was coming up the trail. Through the rough stuff, Kookie would lean back. For context, when you're riding through whoops and a wash or any really rough terrain, at least on a dirt bike or a quad, you want to lean back and gas it so that your vehicle rides underneath the bumps, and you do that by leaning back. That's what the dog was learning to do. And the soft stuff, he said the dog would just stand up. That's mind-blowing. And then just for added context while we're on the topic, suspension and just off-road technology was a little bit different back then. Granted, this article and all the information I could find really only leads me to look at the 60s, 70s, maybe even some of the early 80s when John was in his peak riding times. And the suspension technology and the comfort of dirt bikes was just not what it was today. All right, bypass shocks and reservoirs weren't a thing. Padding was minimal. Drum brakes on literally everything. The reliability, a lot of these bikes were air cooled. They weren't even liquid cooled yet. All right, so it took a real sack between your legs to hop on and ride one of these things. You were crazy just for riding them. And no, there weren't side-by-sides and all these crazy buggies that you can go buy with a high-interest loan nowadays. Back then, if somebody had a really badass off-road vehicle, it's because they fabricated it in their garage or they worked hard, right? So, of the multiple races, the Czech Chase and Cherries Creek Hare and the Hound, Kookie didn't just hang on. He was a real racer. From Barstow to Vegas, we'll throw that up on the map. That's how far that is. Through the desert, not the highway. John had concern for Kookie. As Kookie was getting up there in the years, like any dog owner, you take him in for a checkup, you take him to the vet. Just before we go on this long race, John had to be sure. And in the vet's words, the vet said,
"This dog has the heart of an athlete. What do you do with him?"
To which John replied,
"I let him run around chase rabbits in the desert."
So that just goes to show, cardio, respiratory, exercise is good for the heart of humans and dogs. And with the doctor's blessing, the dog father rested reassured, knowing he could take him on the Barstow to Vegas race, and he did. But before his 14th birthday, McCown decided that that would be the last race that Kookie would go on. Kookie actually lived to the ripe old age of 16 and pushed out a couple pups. Kookie Jr., nicknamed KJ, and Little Kookie, both of which had the passion for riding that their dog dad did. This part was pretty cool. I read in the article, he said,
quote, "I rode a 2-day qualifier 180 miles a day with KJ. At the end of the first day, he crawled under the table and slept for 12 hours. I figured there was no way he'd want to go on day 2, and I wasn't about to take him on another 180 miles. But the next morning, he almost tore the leash out of the girl's hand who was holding him, jumped on, and went the distance."
It's in their blood, man. It's in their blood. So that was pretty wild. In that particular event, they earned a silver medal. But their victory was cut short when later that summer, Kookie Jr., during 4th of July fireworks, ran away, never to be seen again. His place on McCown's gas tank was eventually taken by yet another son of the original Kookie, Little Kookie, but it's clear that KJ could never be replaced emotionally. Him and his wife did an interview with ABC, and they got really emotional that they had to do 3 different takes because it was just so hard when they brought up the topic of Kookie Little Kookie Jr.? Kookie Jr. Needless to say, John was devastated. His wife recalls he never wanted to see the desert or race again.
Baxter. Huh? No!
But one thing led to another, and with little Kookie by his side, they were back at it. And together, they managed to capture the 175cc class championship in AMA District 37. And they had plans to contest in an Enduro 6-day qualifier for that season. Now, they say they weren't sure if that John was the first 53-year-old to compete in that championship, but they know for damn sure that a dog was to ever qualify for the ISDE. And during all of this, McCown and his dog earned factory sponsorships, finally, from Kawasaki, Can-Am, and Osa. It was long overdue. He remembers being greeted by people at the smoke bomb.
The term smoke bomb referred to a smoke marker used at the beginning of a race to indicate the direction all riders needed to head during the chaotic mass start.
And being stopped by a fella and saying,
John, with all this publicity, you ought to be getting something out of it, man.
I am getting something out of it, man.
but sponsorships were never McCown's end goal. 3 factory sponsorships wasn't average for a rider, but John and Kookie managed to get it because they've represented the most important thing about racing, having fun.
I like to have fun.
Not only did they make appearances in the famous motorcycle documentary on Any Sunday,
there's even a guy who rides the desert with his dog. There's a rug in the tank the dog hangs onto. He's got claws like an eagle. Their pit stops are kind of unusual.
check it out if you have a chance. It's kind of old, kind of quirky, but it is free on YouTube. Kookie was the only non-human to ever be featured on the show The Thrill Seekers that John was invited to. But outside of all these network television programs and documentaries, what actually brought John joy was writing children's books and his profession as a butcher. You see, John took his real-life stories and turned them into something people could enjoy. Kookie, the motorcycle racing dog, and Kookie Rides Again. And if you could find them, I can't find them on eBay, but if you know where they are, I would definitely buy a copy, so hit me up in the comments. McCown made no claims to special training techniques, despite owning 3 dogs which have been ready and willing to brave the dangers of the racing and often brutal elements of the Southern California desert. He said,
I really believe the dogs have been domesticated for so many centuries that their basic instinct is to please you. If they can comprehend what you want, they'll do it. I think it's just the love and the rapport that you have makes them want to be there with you.
He said in an interview he denied any special bloodline with his dogs Kookie and Kookie Jr. He even mentioned in the article that he had a 70-pound Australian Shepherd that also liked to ride. So this guy was spreading his disease from dog to dog. John said,
He'll knock you down, just get on a motorcycle, but of course he's too darn big. I'll race for as long as there's desert out there and the BLM will stay off our back and we can get out there and do it. I had a very good friend who was recently 65. He was my hero, and I hope to still be doing it when I'm 65. I'm not some 50-year-old man sitting at home with a big potbelly watching television. I'm active, and I think I'm in good shape. It's been rewarding for me. I'll pull into a gas station on the way to a race, and some guy will whip in and ask, is that the dog that races motorcycles? A lot of nice things have happened to us. It's been very good to us.
On July 14th, 2011, John passed away from complications during heart surgery, but his legacy lives on.
So if we can learn anything from John and Kookie's story, is that you don't have to be the fastest one in the desert, you just have to be out there doing it to inspire others. If you don't have a friend to ride with, don't rule out your dog, they're your best friend. And if you have a chance, find it in your heart, get back to the community, take care of the desert, get out there and ride, like and subscribe. I hope you liked the video. Catch you next time.
You could be a great desert doggy. You could be the best desert doggy.